Welcome to another episode of Grief Heals, the podcast where we explore how it is that grief heals us with our relationship with ourselves, with one another, and our whole wide world. I am your host, Lisa Michelle Zega, and I am excited to have another conversation. Good morning, or whatever time of day it is whenever you are choosing to listen to this recording. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing your time, your energy, that which we give our time to, our energy to, we give our lives to. So, wow, what a humbling recognition, right? So, let's just take a moment to breathe together, inhaling slowly deep into the belly, exhaling just a bit slower than the inhale. Yeah, like that. One more deep breath in and exhaling slowly. I just recognized when I was inhaling, I was lifting my shoulders, not a problem, and it is information. So, wow, a lot has happened in the United States of America. United States. Isn't that an interesting phrase? I mean, it gives the sense that we are united as one. And wow, that is just not the case. But that's actually not been the case for the entire history of the United States. Some people are represented and not all people are represented. And wow, I'm just thinking about that and thinking about the collective grief. Like when we recognize that we are all connected and that what happens to one actually happens to all. When we recognize that the suffering of another is actually my own suffering. Perhaps we would recognize a collective grief, a need for a collective mourning, mourning, of weeping and wailing and coming back together as a people, rehumanizing human, humanizing human, humanizing humanity. And not just humanity, like beings, all that is alive, all that is like, it's not just what I do to you, I do to myself. What I do to the environment, I do to myself. What I do to the water supply, I do to myself. So, my heart feels heavy. It feels heavy with all of us, and not just like people in the United States. I'm just going to say it out loud. I don't know that I consider myself an American as much as like just an earthling and one who is connected and united to this universe, not so much united to a nation. And I believe in people and in resilience. I believe in compassion, in love, in grief, wow, I am just in the need for another breath. So I study hypnosis and I study under Melissa Tiers, Tiers, melissatiers.com. You can find her that way, or integrative hypnosis. But what led me to the study of hypnosis is understanding how much of what I do and the people around me do is being influenced, right, by what happened to us. And specifically at like very crucial time in life, before we were 2 months old, and then also under 4 years old. But here's the thing, we have been absorbing immense amounts of information, and our brain is just a pattern machine, and it's so much more than that. But our brain is constantly looking for patterns, and to make sense of the world, to make sense of our sensation, to make sense of our histories and what we've experienced, and tends to categorize things: safe, unsafe, safe, unsafe, right? And sometimes the brain, it's getting it right for the when it's originally categorizing or logging this information. But as our environments change, our situations change, ways that the brain is interpreting, right, the sensations of experience that seem familiar, it's not always accurate, right? Like sometimes our brain is making a mistake for the present situation. Why am I saying all this? Because I'm looking at the panic, like a collective panic attack, or the exhilaration of some just utterly celebratory, and I'm looking at us as a collective organism, a living being, intimately connected, like one and separate at the same time. I'm like, you want me to explain all that? I mean, what? But I am thinking of aspen trees, and this, like, they have a shared root system, but above ground, absolutely beautiful. And every tree looks like this one separate individual tree. But if you look underneath, every single aspect of that tree, of its living root system, its nourishment, is shared. And that's really how I'm looking at us as humanity. And I personally know so many people who are really grieving, are in such angst for what this means for our future, what this presidential election means. And I know people who are rejoicing and celebrating and thinking that this is like the best for our country in the United States. And I'm like, wow, this is definitely an opportunity. This is an opportunity to recognize not just our own individual needs, wants, desires, fears, suffering. Like it's an opportunity to recognize how various decisions impact all of us. And so just the economy, right? Let's just say that. Just because the economy is doing well for some doesn't mean it's doing well for all. Like capitalism, there's, people talk about capitalism and opportunity and America and all the land of the home of the free and land of the brave, or whatever. Land of the free, home of the brave, something like that. Well, there have been and are and have been immensely brave people in the history of this land, who economic boom for some did not actually mean economic boom for them. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Even people that helped colonists and settlers to dominate this land have been exploited and oppressed. And that impacts all of us. Right now, one of the things coming to mind is homelessness. People that have experienced generations of poverty and people that are experiencing homelessness. And see, when we don't pay attention to our history and we don't pay attention to the fact that we are all one, what we tend to do is divide and separate, and we other we other our fellow man, woman, child. And rather than entering a collective grief that allows for all of us to be loved, for us to come into, enter, recognize the suffering of all, it's like, well, whatever happened to you must be your fault. So I listen to people and the way that they, and even I in my history, I am sure, because I absorbed this collective belief system around, oh, well, if you're in a homeless situation, it must be your fault. If you are in the criminal justice system, well, that must be that you did something wrong, that you have, broken the law, been bad, whatever. And the more I study, I am not a politician. Well, you know that, but I am not very politically savvy. I am not a philosopher, although I philosophize quite a bit. I'm not a historian. That there are several things that I have been ignorant to for long periods of time. It is only more recent that I'm really studying American history. And there are times that I've done little dips here and there, but this feels like the most integrated time, the most, I don't really have the word, like where concentrated, more like just bringing things together. There has never been a land of the free, home of the brave for all here. I don't know if that's true of anywhere. And there is a residual impact of the way this land was settled. I just feel the need to put air quotes around that. And it seems like there's this idea of like, well, that's just how progress is made. That's just how it's done. Someone comes in and dominates another. I'm thinking about the natives to this land and all the promises that were made to them every time they cooperated with the government. And all those promises that were broken. And see, now I have people in my life that are have been on the not so good side of the criminal justice system, who come from that lineage, and that oppression doesn't like just stop and go away. I was watching a documentary by Martha Stewart, the documentary about Martha Stewart. I watched it last night and the night before, and at one point she does some time in is it a prison? Is I know they called it the cupcake, the cupcake prison, and she's because it's just, it was considered more soft, and I'm sure because it is more soft than other detention holding, punishment centers of modern day slavery. And one of the things she talked about, she just mentioned, was there is zero focus on rehabilitation. There is, she said there's nothing even fresh, right? Like no nutrients, like fresh food, or even though there's a garden, like at that place, there was like, as far as materials to nurture the soil, and she wouldn't have had that insight had she not had that experience. And for me, one of the things is I get to, in I want to say it was 2015 is when I first started volunteering regularly at an organization that served those experiencing homelessness. Maybe that was 2014. And then if it weren't for my own relationship resources, because I was cut off from all financial resources and did not have employment at the time, I could have very, very easily been in a situation where I didn't have a roof over my head and needed to stay in a shelter. Now, what was different for me is what I did have is a tremendous network of relationships of people that would take me in a heartbeat, right? And I also was raised with the rules of the mainstream, right? So like the focus for me growing up was about achievement and about relationships, because my family also had roots in generational poverty. And in generational poverty, like the driving force, the motivating factor is like survival. And how do you survive? Lots of dependence on relationships. Well, I grew up where it was more, considered middle class. And so the focus was on stability. And how do you do that? Well, you achieve. And so the driving force is just like, we've got to achieve to get ahead, right? And then in case you're curious, and this is from the work of Dr. Ruby Payne, but in a framework for understanding poverty, for the wealthy, the driving force is connections. You live and die by connections. You are rewarded and punished with connections, financial connections, political connections, social connections, all the things. How did I get here? Oh, because when I was in a desperate financial situation, I still had all of the resources that I gained from being connected to I had social cohesion to the main social structure. And so I knew the rules of the game, even though I didn't know, because the rules are hidden in each of these social constructs. I didn't know that I knew the rules. And why am I sharing all this? Because we're often looking at what other people are doing or not doing based on resources that we have that we don't recognize that other people don't have. And how does that relate to our history? Well, that's just it. When we've been sold a narrative that anyone can get ahead here in the great US of A, and we don't know, like, literal systems of oppression that just repeat again and again and again, then we're not coming together. We don't know each other's suffering. And the reason that I care about grief is, see, when we're little and we're just surviving, we're in our own survival state, our world is ourselves. That's why when a mommy and a daddy get divorced, no matter how many times they tell that little, this is not your fault. This is not about you. That little absorbs the sense that it is, because that little experiences the whole world as related to themselves, right? It's like an egocentric world. It's part of the way the brain develops, like the little's not doing anything wrong. And then we go through stages of development. But you know what? When we don't enter our own suffering, there's another way that we stay in that egocentric mindset. There's like this way that, well, nobody came for me. Nobody helped me when I was in need. And so I just got to be all about me and all about my own. But there's this incredible thing that happens. This is making me think that Brandon Cook, his podcast is Naming the Real. It's just one of my absolute favorites. But he did a series, I want to say it was a 4-part series on spiritual development. And he was connecting with the work of Dr. Scott Peck in that. But why am I bringing this up? Because there are stages of development, and just because we grow up in an adult body doesn't mean we've actually entered all those stages of development. And so like in the podcast that Brandon shared, there's this like stage of very good, bad, right, wrong, right? Like and it is a very egocentric stage. And so just because we grow up doesn't mean that we grow out of that stage. And what happened for me, like, these stages can be at different areas of our life, right? So I might be at one stage developmentally in my relationships. I might be at a different stage of development in how I relate to the workforce. I might be at a different stage of development in my spirituality, right? And all these concentric circles running and spinning around each other as we grow and as we change and as we develop. For me, so much of how I experienced myself was as wife, as mom, as Christian, as all these labels that when they collapsed, I had a devastation within, and that devastation also created a lot of openings. And one of the things, and I know I've shared it many times, and it's just my truth, so I'll probably share it again and again and again, is that my children, a girlfriend and I were just talking about this because I was very naive, and also I gave my kids experiences that I did not have. For one, my children had a stable mom, dad, married, together upbringing. And my children had the influence of the church and of God, and right? So, and then they had this mom which is me, so devoted to being a good mommy. And they also had this mom with, her own history that had just gone unwitnessed, unseen, unloved, right? But I did know that they were receiving things that I did not receive. And what I had this like revelation within myself of my mom as a young mom having the same idea, the same thoughts of like, I am protecting my daughters from things that I was not protected from. I am giving them some security that I simply didn't have. I am staying with them in a way that, and I recognize that she also, like me, and like the girlfriend that I was talking to, likely had this naive sense that my children are going to be so much better off than me because I'm giving them more than what I experienced. And that was true. Like for my mom, that's true for me. But you know what I hadn't yet done? Entered my own, what I did receive that I didn't need. I didn't enter my own path and give her some recognition. And I didn't bring awareness to what I did get, right? And what I was passing on to my kids. So I was really shocked. I was really surprised at how much my own children suffered from their upbringing. And this feels like it's all over the place. And I also have this knowing that it is not all over the place. I know that it is very much, to say it differently, very much connected and woven together. The reason I started studying hypnosis is because of all those things that live under the surface. Did you know that depending on, what studies you're reading or whatever, but regardless, 95 to 98% of that, the actions we take, the way we think and the actions we take and the sensations and the way we feel is in our subconscious. Like, it's not a conscious decision. I'm going to think this way. I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to act this way. It's being ruled by things that we've absorbed, only 3 to 5%. And the conscious mind can only hold like 5 bits of information at one time, plus or minus 2. It's like cuckoo. The reason I started studying hypnosis is because the more I understood about the way that we work, that our brain works, the more I understood, wow, there is so much untapped power and resource to help me in the direction that I want to go, to help me grow my capacity to grieve, to help me grow my capacity to love, to help me move in where I want to move in when I find myself moving out, right? Like, based on what I've absorbed, it's so funny. I've got so much criticism in my head that I'm just interrupting. And let me just give you a way to do that. So just you find a focal point anywhere, and then you soften your gaze around it and simply become aware of all that's not that in the environment, like really expanding the vision to the peripheral sensations. It's not even so much of what can I see, it's what can I sense. All that space around me, behind me, above me, below me, right? And what are we doing there? Just loosening the grip of what can become the focus, so the criticism in my head. Let me just give you an example, right? Because so that this can make a little bit more sense. I absorbed information that when I'm questioned, that could be dangerous, right? Like, that's about getting in trouble. Being questioned is often about getting in trouble. So to this day, it actually, thanks to hypnosis, I can actually say not to this day, but up until not that long ago, when someone would ask me a question about something I had done, an automatic sensation would arise in my body. And I would begin, defending myself or making excuses, or like without any thought. It was automatic, ruled from all that resource in the subconscious mind. So I needed that to be utilized for what I'm up to, for where I do want to lean in. I want to lean in. I lean in with curiosity, right? That is such a preferred state in my body, to be curious versus defensive. And another way that this relates to me studying hypnosis is I simply wanted to expand my capacity to be with whatever is, and to expand my capacity to love. And when I notice my body on automatic having historical responses, the idea that I and others can change our state, that we can actually create a state that's resourced, that has like what we need, and then to bring that back into the places that need that very resourced state. So I don't know how you're responding to this election. I don't know what's happening for you. And I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to come together in empathy, in compassion, in love, to do what is needed, right? Like, I'm not just, I don't know. For me right now, what is needed is working with people who have experienced systemic oppression and help them to know that there's nothing wrong with you, and to give them resources to expand their own vision and opportunities and automatic reactions in their bodies. For me, what's needed is coming together as people and listening and learning and growing. And I really do genuinely think there is a need for a collective mourning. Whether or not you are elated or miserable based on what's going on in America or in the world, for us to expand our own emotional resources and resilience so that we can stand in the gap for one another, with one another, that we can stand for each other and with each other. And I do think there is something too when we ignore our history and the collective history, that we stay in a very polarized experience, not just outwardly, inwardly. You know, one of the things that I shared in this most recent workshop I delivered is whatever's going on inside is also going on outside. So if there's chaos on the inside of you, there will be chaos on the outside of you. If there's polarization on the inside, meaning some parts of you are celebrated and some parts are rejected, you will see that in how you are with your fellow man. You will see that as a life. If you are completely detached within, then you will be detached on the outside. And God, I love how we're designed, because we're not stuck. We're not stuck with whatever's on the inside. And what is in must out. And we have the power, resiliency to change our state and to change our outcomes. And I mean, by state, I mean state of being, not like state that you live in. But for whatever you're up to, for whatever you feel called to do, changing the internal state gives resource to go out and do what matters, because our hearts matter, our lives matter, Whatever I do impacts all. And so as I accept part of myself, I accept part of you. As I love one, as I'm loving you, I love me. As I'm loving me, I'm loving you. Like it's all connected. So I'm just going to end there with a great big, I want to say galactic, like hug. I mean, hugging not just you and me, but everyone, every version of us in the metaverse, every version of every living being of every time, right? Past, present, and future, and believing with all my heart that love is the universal language. So out with my arms and around and grabbing and holding and squeezing and believing and breathing in from the heart and out from the heart. May you know that you are loved today.
You've been listening to Grief Heals with Lisa Michelle Zega. The podcast is produced by me, Eric Simpson, in association with Jump Up and Down Productions. Music by Candelian, Drunken Nights to Sunday Mornings, and Stefan Carlin, A Calming Ocean, A Common Notion. If you would like more information about the work Lisa does, point your browsers to legityou.com. That's LEGITYOU. Lisa can also be reached at Lisa Michelle at legityou.com. This has been a Jump Up and Down production.